Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware. Today we're taking a look at this PC case from Gamdias that they were kind enough to send out. This is the Talos M1, which checks off a lot of the boxes for the types of things that people are looking for in 2019 for a premium case. We have a side glass window, we have RGB elements in the front, we have on paper a pretty good case, but let's take a look under the hood and see if it's any good and if it's worth your roughly $90 right now if you're paying retail for this case. Now, right off the bat, this is a fairly large chassis, and it does pack in a lot of those premium features that I tend to look for in a case. Now, the one thing that I was a little bit concerned with right off the bat is this glass in the front seems to cover a lot of the front panel, but actually it has some fairly large cutouts along the side, which allow air to be very readily taken into the case. So those two fans are not really choked off in any meaningful way, at least as far as I could tell. Now, with that though, you are gonna get dust inside this PC case, and this is complaint number one with this case, and that is there's just no front air filtration of any kind. We have this nice top magnetic air filter, if you're gonna use that, if you're gonna use fans up top at all, and we do have a PSU air filter on the bottom of the chassis. But the one place that you're gonna be taking in the most airflow in this case is through the front, and no air filtration, and there is some sort of like honeycomb metal work behind the fans on the inside of the case, which you can actually very easily cut out without compromising the fan mounts, and that's actually really cool because that does allow you then to have even more airflow coming into the case. The problem is that will also open up the case even further to dust. Now, it should be mentioned you could very easily grab an air filter and just throw it in behind the fans where that intake is happening and filter out a lot of dust that way. That is absolutely a possibility, and it would actually still be very easy to clean because the number one feature that I love about this PC case is the door design, because we do have a hinged glass panel, and that makes it really easy to get into the case. Now, the door design actually brings me to complaint number two with this case, and that is mostly just that the tinting on the door is way too dark. One of the big things that I look for in a tempered side glass panel is the ability to show off my hardware, and to be honest, this glass is so dark that you can't really see anything that's not lit up inside of the chassis, which some people will love, but the problem is it's so dark that you're not showing off any hardware whatsoever. You're showing off a few lights, anything that has a light with it. Like in this view right here, I think you can see the light on the MSI GPU in this system, but that's really about it. And to give you a little bit more of an idea of how dark this glass is, because you're at an angle, I'll do this. Now, with the side glass removed, you can see inside the case a little bit better. And before we jump into the internal aspects of this chassis, I do want to make mention of the front panel. And I have mine located up here on top where I have my power button and my USB and my fan control as well as the RGB control. That's the normal location for most cases. Now, the default for this chassis though is actually to have the Gamdias logo on top and then the front I/O on the bottom, which you can actually rearrange however you want. I really wish the default was to put it on top, which is just where most people are comfortable with it, I think. However, if you do want to switch that around, it's actually a fairly easy process, though I highly recommend you make that decision before you build in this case so those cables aren't already managed behind the motherboard tray. Now, with that, the Gamdias logo is really annoying because it does light up yellow, and I'll throw up a picture from their website, but you can't change the color along with the rest of the chassis, so I actually just left that plug completely unplugged, and it's a Molex power plug, which I don't particularly like. And to be fair, the other power for the fans as well as the RGB is also a Molex plug, which again, I don't really like, though I was fortunate my power supply has Molex on it, so no big deal for me, though it is something to consider if you're looking into getting this chassis. Of course, you could always just get an adapter for probably just a couple few dollars in case you don't have Molex on your power supply. Fan control is cycled through a button on that front IO plate sort of thing there. There are 3 settings. You have low, high, and off, as well as RGB control as well, controlled through a button, and it just cycles through a bunch of those effects, which I can do right now. Now on the inside of things, at least on this side, we do have a nice basement here for your power supply with lots of cutouts here that you can pass cables through. My only complaint with these cutouts is there are no rubber grommets in this case, and for $90, that's something that I might expect to see, though. I will say that all of these edges are nice and smooth. There's no sharp edges in this case to speak of, so Gamdias did at least a good job with that, making up for maybe the lack of rubber grommets. Other than that, the build process on the front side is pretty darn basic. It's got wide open spaces. It's easy to find mounts for things. We've got a couple of other mounts that we could use for things, I assume, like SSDs, that sort of thing, if you want to put them on the front side and show them off a little bit. All of my drives are mounted on the back side, though. Now, before I forget, I did want to make mention that this chassis does support vertical GPU mounts, though I would not necessarily recommend using it, and that's just because it puts the GPU so close to that side glass that it's going to cut off airflow, at least to some degree, with that GPU. It may show it off a little bit better, and maybe you're into that sort of thing, and if you do have a GPU that runs pretty cool to begin with, maybe that's something you'd be interested in, but just know that you are going to limit your airflow over your GPU significantly by doing that. I would recommend just sticking with the normal horizontal mount and moving from there. Now, on the back side of this particular chassis, we actually have quite a bit of room for cable management, and with the only exception for that being around the drive cage, which is sort of buried behind these cables here. That's where I have my 3.5-inch hard drive as well as my 2.5-inch SATA-based SSD. I do like the recessed sort of cutout here that you can run the majority of your cables, which is exactly what I did, which is great because there's not actually a lot of room between the motherboard tray and the actual back panel. So having this very deep cutout is very essential for easy cable management. I will say, though, with some zip ties and using the many tie down points that this case provides, it was not hard to manage all these cables. Also, now that we're back here, I do want to point out the fan controller, and it has 2 things that I don't like about it. The one is it uses Molex power. Fine, I can deal with that. But the bigger issue that I have with it is it does not use or even have any 4-pin PWM fan headers on it. So if you are gonna hook up a fan to this fan controller, you need to use Gamdias fans that use their little proprietary connector. It's probably not a big deal because if you are adding a fan to this case, which I actually do recommend because there are no exhaust fans stock in this case, it just comes with the 2 front fans, so I do recommend that you add one in the back, though if you are adding one, it's probably just going to get plugged straight into a motherboard header instead of through this fan controller. Not really a huge deal, but it is something worth note. Really, the last thing to note about this chassis and the build process is we do have this very large cutout on the back of the motherboard tray, so if you are exchanging coolers at any point, you have very easy access to that back plate in case that's what you need access to, so A+ on that front. So I guess this all brings me to my conclusion of the Talos M1. And here's what I would say if you're thinking about buying this case. Go through the checklist and make sure that it's right for you. First off, do you feel that the other cases at roughly $90 are either on par or even worse off than this case? Because there are a lot of great $90 cases out there that provide a lot of creature comforts that this case does also provide. So if it stacks up well in your mind to some of those other $90 cases, then move on to the aesthetic appeal. Do you like this particular case? Do you like a dark side glass panel, and do you need RGB elements? Because if you do, then this may be the case for you. And if you don't, then probably not the case for you. So I guess what I'm basically getting at is, yes, I like this case. Yes, I think it's a solid option at $90. I would not say that it is the end-all be-all case of the $90 price point. However, it is certainly worth your consideration. And a big thanks goes out once again to Gamdias for sending this case out, because it was really nice to take a look at, especially from a case manufacturer that I hadn't had my hands on any of their work before. So this is definitely a good first impression, and I hope to hear more from their case department in the years to come. But of course, I do want to hear from you guys. What do you think about Gamdias's cases, especially the Talos M1, especially if you're somebody that owns this case and has built in it? What do you think about it? Let me know all your thoughts down below. And of course, if you like this video and you want to see more, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment. All those things are very helpful to the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.